Oh my gosh, I miss you, my friend. It's been a minute.
It has. A lot's been going on in my life. How about yours?
Oh, nothing, just sitting around having my nails done and brushing the cats
And doing your hair.
and always doing my hair. Oh my God,
I
I
know
gotta have a couple.
it takes forever.
It annoys my bride to no end when I just go, all right, I'm good.
Yeah, yeah. Aren't you ready yet, sweetie?
Oh my gosh, he's Dewey Freeman. I'm Mark Sylvester. We are the Elder Council. And just because I think we have some new listeners out, just to remind why are we doing this, Dewey?
Oh, wow. Good question. There's something about being late 60s, early 70s that I believe allows us to look back and go, when I was 20, when I was 31, when I was 47, I wish that I would have had somebody to talk to who had been through quote, this before, whatever this is. And if we can speak to a number of things that allow people to gain from our experience in life and not have to go through some of the trials and tribulations that we have, that's why we're here, is to allow people to get that. And I'm actually reminded, my sister, bless her heart, who I love and I'm super close to, a couple of days ago sent me a picture of our grandparents. And they're elder in the picture. I'm guessing they're like late 60s, early 70s. My grandfather died when he was 73. So and it was like, oh, I could go to him, and then I lost him.
Quick question. Did he feel old to you?
Yes, at the time he felt old. And
How old are you right now?
I am 72.
So you're his age.
Yeah.
Probably, and you knew him when he was 50, right?
I knew him, yes.
Right?
Yes.
So how is it? And I know you feel young.
That would be true. I do not.
Do you think
old.
he felt young?
That's a great question. Here's what's interesting. That's a great question. What's interesting to me is I do think that perhaps I perceived him as old, but he never acted old.
Okay. There's the meat right there.
Yeah, it was like, and he was an incredible man. And I know that part of the reason he died early is because of the work that he did. He worked in the rubber shops in Akron, Ohio. He worked for Firestone and was a major leader in Firestone. He put together the first rubber workers union for Firestone, Goodyear, Goodrich, et cetera, et cetera. He was very involved in that. But yeah, he had a really vibrant life energy. So if I looked and went, oh, what's his life energy? If I had that life energy, would I feel old? The answer would be no. No, I wouldn't.
There you go. So there is a youthful spirit, and just reminding people, we're not your dad, we're not your grandfather, we're not your boss, we're not any of those things. We are adults who care about other adults and helping them. And if they can get one thought out of our conversation that helps, and that we make this moment memorable, that's why I'm doing this.
Absolutely. Yes.
So you had a thought of where we might focus our conversation on today, due to some recent things that are going on there in Colorado.
Yeah, let me just share a little bit. And this is actually this actually ties in at least some to my grandfather, because my grandfather was very politically active. He was the first, or one, and I'm trying to remember back. I'd have to fact check this, but he was very involved in putting together the rubber workers union for the employees of the major tire companies: Goodyear, Goodrich, Firestone. And if people don't know, at one point, Akron, Ohio was considered the rubber capital of the world. It's not now, but it was then. And what was really interesting is that in following him politically, people fought over ideas, but they didn't seem to make it as personal as what is going on now.
Mm-hmm.
There was actually a level of civility and respect, although there were times when my grandfather would come off of picket lines bloodied up. So
yeah,
um,
I'm guessing he had some stories to tell in that regard.
He did have stories to tell, and one of the real interesting things is he would come. I spent a lot of time with my grandfather, and he would come to his home, and he'd be bloodied up, and he'd be with some of the other rubber workers, and it was really interesting because they were all. It was a very diverse group of men, and it was really one of the places I learned about diversity and respect, and seeing people for who they are, not for their background or their skin color or their height or any of those, their weight, what they looked like. It was like, being literally on the same team. One of the pieces that I do remember was his involvement politically, and he actually was, both he and my father were involved in World War II. My grandfather became an aide to Truman and traveled Europe with Truman. I have pictures of him, and looking at literally the tires on Jeeps and tanks and et cetera, et cetera. But again, there was in all of that intensity, there still was an underlying respect. It felt like to me.
Underlying respect for other people who didn't necessarily share his views. So to extrapolate, possibly as a fledgling union boss dealing with management, he could respect management, possibly even go have a beer with them, even though they were on complete opposite side, literally on opposite sides of the table. Is that right?
Yes, and you mentioning that he would go have a beer with them, he did.
I would guess that was an okay thing to do.
Yes, Miller High Life, by the way.
This show brought to you by Miller High Life.
Yes. And here's what I'm finding. I have come across, just in the last couple of weeks, with different men sharing with me places where in a system or an organization where there was some conflict and disagreement, but that conflict and disagreement was taken to a personal level. It wasn't way beyond what it should have been taken. I mean, instead of saying, I disagree with your ideas, I disagree with your direction here, I'm questioning this, it's like having their children be harassed on the street, or making fun of the person's wife, or that kind of stuff, or threatening even to come to their homes. And it's, instead of it being, I disagree, or I even strongly disagree with you, and here are the reasons, and then trying to work something out, it has become incredibly personal and crossed boundaries that change the direction of the conversation. Instead of, oh, well, I'm for this or I'm against this, it gets really personal. One of the reasons I'm bringing this up is I'm on the fire department up here where I live, and a part of it, and we're going for a bond levy or bond issue to build a new fire station. And instead of it being about, should we do this or not do this, it's about, you're cheating, and you're this and you're that, and people standing on the corner, and when you walk by, they flip you off, and it's
because
like,
you're the
really?
fire guy.
Yeah. And it's like, this is about a possible tax increase of X amount of money. It's not about whether or not you should be flipped off for driving your car around the corner. And so what I really, and what I'm guessing is that many men in this, who listen to this, have this happen, or experience something like this. And it's like, one of the questions is, how do we, one is how do we lead in such a way that we help eliminate some of that? And how do we, what do we do when that happens to us? Because if someone says, do I disagree with you, I think you're full of shit, and your numbers aren't correct, and that kind of thing, it's like, okay, you have that right to do that. And you even have that right to do that if you haven't done the research that you need to do, but you still have the right to do that. What I don't know that people have the right to do is to go after somebody's children, or to follow them, tailgate them down the road in a menacing manner, to literally threaten their livelihood. And it's like, that's a really big deal. And it's like, and there's something about overstepping bounds to try to get to an end. And so I thought I'd put that out for us to maybe talk about some, because one of the things, for instance, I mean, you and I have multiple levels of our relationship, and which we were actually talking about a little bit off air. But the same way with Connor Beaton, for instance, I do a lot of stuff with him, and the level of respect is like, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's a fucking 20. The same thing with Traver. I mean, many roles.
Respect for you.
Respect for the person, yes.
For the person. And yet when you don the mantle of chairman of the board of the fire department, that there's none of that, because they for a bit of the population that feels like you're the man and digging into my pocket, they've politicized something that's just a fact of life. We need fire protection, kids, and we need to pay for it, and the way to pay for it is through taxes. That's how the American way works. We tax, yes, to be able to raise the money. Unless you want to just pay a fire department protection fee, whatever you want to call it, we'll call it a tax. We need to have that. And if you think there's mismanagement of the funds, it's because you have a general distrust of anything that's organized. Right.
Yeah.
Did I kind of get that mostly, right?
Yes. And yes, exactly. I mean, and even what's interesting about it, this is a little bit of a takeoff on this, is that there's a thing called an ISO rating. If anyone on here is a firefighter, here's this,
Yeah,
they'll know what that
sure.
means. And it's the,
International Standards Organization. So
yeah, it's the rating of the fire department's ability to respond to calls, that you're within a certain distance of every home, and that you can respond in a certain way and a certain speed with a certain number of people and certain kind of vehicles, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the bottom line is if this tax doesn't come through, that ISO rating is going to change. So it's like you can pay for it here, you can pay for it here, and because our insurance will go up, our homeowners insurance will go up, and most people, even on the taxes that would be raised, spend probably close to that, whatever the raise is, on Starbucks a month. It's like, but what's happening is it turns to be personal.
right.
It turns that you're a cheat, or does your wife know about this, or it becomes a personal thing. And I can't imagine and I haven't, to be honest about it, I haven't had to deal with a huge amount of that. I have more in this last couple of weeks because the election is Tuesday. But I certainly know that that's been happening, for instance, with our chief. There are 2 or 3 other men in my life who've just shared with me something similar. It's like,
Right.
instead of saying, hey, I don't agree with what you just did, it's like, I don't agree with what you just did, and you're a piece of shit.
So
And so how do we
anecdotally,
deal with that?
exactly. And I'm going to say in the 50 years that I've lived in Santa Barbara, and I would say I'm not political, probably apolitical. So I mean, I'm not your grandfather. I'm not that guy. I'm a different guy. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm informed, and I can't remember a time when this was the general malaise that affects all of us. And I think we can look at the leadership, right? This comes from leaders, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if a leader can trash talk an election worker, or trash talk just a civilian, which happened, has happened, is happening, when leaders trash talk people just for being people, right? Not for the idea. It's like, oh, you
Mm-hmm.
fat slob or whatever. It's a personal attack rather than a professional thing. And it comes from leaders and they're not chastised, then that becomes the new norm. Like, oh, that's okay. I can do that. Like, who I feel bad for doing that. Like, would you talk to your wife that way? Or talk to your significant other that way? No way.
Right.
You wouldn't do it. But there's an anonymity that is fueled by our easy access to social media,
Yeah.
and then our belief that we can then go do that in real life. And so I think, and it's because it starts at the leaders and has trickled down. I think to answer the question is, we need to show up as leaders and not be that way ourselves, for sure, because we model the behavior we want to have happen. And so we can, I think we can't then trash talk them for being that way,
True.
right? Because that's so I think there's the line, right? Is what's the right way to do this. Now, an example, my father-in-law, uh he will on he has for years goes out of his way to understand the other point of view on most everything,
Mm-hmm.
goes out of his way to do that. And he knows he does not agree with it. He wants to understand it so that he can have a deeper appreciation for why they might feel that way on whatever it is,
Hmm.
and he
Hmm.
is involved. He does pay attention to like the small town politics, and they just live, the town next to us. And they go to, and they're involved. They go to the board of supervisors meetings. They go to the city council meetings.
Hmm.
They're informed and they talk, but they don't attack, right?
Yes. And there's a thing actually while you were talking is the word predator came to mind.
Hmm.
And and I know that I've said this in another show with you, is that horses are prey animals, and for us to work with them to walk in, we have to not be a predator. And
Hmm.
um, there is there has been a almost permission for people to be predatorial with another person. Even, your neighbor's dog comes on your lawn and takes a crap. It's like, are you gonna deal with that and go, this pile of crap needs to be cleaned up? Or are you gonna be predatorial? What are you gonna do? And there is a sense of that being attacking and being a predator is okay, and even encouraged at times. Um,
So there's the question: who gave you permission to be a predator?
exactly. And it's the exact opposite of when in one of Traver's tenets of be a dangerous but not dangerous, or be, did I say that correctly? To be a danger but not dangerous. I think I said that correctly. Which is like, if you need to do something, you need to do it, but you're not walking around being predatorial.
I don't. I may be talking out of school, but I remember, this is a few years back. Traver's been in our program for a while. Him sitting with our group, explaining what that meant. This is
Mm.
before he'd written the book, and explaining the feeling that when he walked into a room, he wanted people to feel a sense that the air had changed
Hmm.
and they were safe.
Yes.
Right, which is that's strong but not
Hmm.
dangerous, right? Just like, whoo, what just happened? Woo, the air in this room just went crackle, crackle, right? And I feel safer. So who gives us permission to be a predator? As soon as you were saying that, I think all of us can think of people in our lives who are those petty, small people who see like they gave themselves permission to be predators. And it's almost like I want to see a picture of them, like a mugshot with the little sign, instead of a number on it, just says predator,
Totally.
right?
Whoa.
Because
It just gives me shivers
right,
even
right.
thinking of that.
So when you think about that, you think about, just talk about predators for a second, because the one that comes to mind is a pack of wolves,
Hmm.
right? All predators, but tend to not be I mean, yes, we have lone wolves. That's the edge case. Most of the time that's the power of the pack, right? That's going to
Hmm.
attack. And I don't know. I'm continuing to think a predator is the person who kills something for food. A predator, maybe to the thing that's been killed. Yeah, but it's not just in this definition we're having here. It's one who just kills for the sake of killing.
Yes. So what you're bringing up is like fantastic. There, people do think about wolves and, quote the lone wolf. Oftentimes, the wolf that is seen as a lone wolf has been kicked out of the pack because It,
Oh.
it's oftentimes not by choice. And it is because of what you just said. Wolves, bears, mountain lions, um, all of those animals that we see as being predators do not kill for the fun of it. They kill as a way to survive, and this is what I'm talking about. There are, and if there, you have to do some searching to find it, but there are actually videos of a pride of lions who has eaten. They're full, and wildebeest, zebras, et cetera, and even horses know that, and they just walk right through the pride of lions.
Hmm.
Because even though a lion, for instance, is seen as a predator, when they're satisfied, they're not predators anymore, and that can be sensed, that can be felt. I think what I'm talking about and what we're talking about is the kind of predator that kills for control and does it just for fun. There is no underlying need to do
So
it.
if we take killing to say killing your spirit, killing the spirit of volunteerism you have in you, because I know all of you fire, all of those in that ecosystem you're in, you all volunteer your time. And so now you have people getting in your face. They're predatorial just through their comments. They're killing your spirit of volunteerism. And much like election workers, spirit of volunteerism is being killed because they don't want people literally showing up at their house and giving them shit in the grocery store and all of that. We're seeing more of that now than as any of, I don't remember ever hearing stories about election workers, you know. So I think
Yes,
we're talking
exactly.
about the same thing, and it's still killing the spirit of something.
Yes.
And that they're killing it not because they need to eat, but because for the sport of it, right? It's just for fun. They laugh and giggle about it, like putting out a mean tweet or
Yes.
what we would think of as an inappropriate cartoon about something, about someone, and just for grins and giggles, not for legitimate discourse.
Exactly. And we seem to have lost that. And you're talking about a pretty big umbrellic picture, which I agree with. And it's not just on a political level, though, that's happening. Like 2 or 3 of the men that I'm talking about, it's happened at their workplace. And I see it happening with neighbors, and I see it happening with, I mean, it's like there's something going on that we are not dealing with and taking care of. And there's been some underlying permission of literally being having, quote, permission, some spoken or unspoken permission to be absolutely abusive to other people. Whether it's cutting, a road rage thing, or whether it's somebody's dog gets on your front lawn, so to speak. And it's like, it does move into that. Going back to what you talked about when Traver was saying, when I walk into a room, I want the air to change and for people to feel safer. That's what I believe that we need to go for.
Mm-hmm.
That's different than walking into a room and people being less safe and going,
Where are the exits?
Yeah, where are the exits?
Where are the exits?
And yes, and so much of that has to do with what we pick up in our gut as well. And some of it's very overt, but so much of that has to do with what we pick up in our gut.
I think what we've just barely scratched is there's a sea change in how we are culturally dealing with opposition.
Yes. Yes.
And that is bigger than two guys sitting on a Saturday morning talking. It feels systemic,
Yes.
and it feels as if we're at the beginning. That sea change doesn't feel like it's changing back in our favor anytime soon.
Very possibly. And you just saying it's bigger than a couple guys sitting on a Saturday morning talking, that's absolutely true. Absolutely. And when we began talking about elderhood at the beginning of this podcast or show, it's like, it's not always been like that, folks.
Right.
It's not always been like that. And in my world, when something's not always, when something's not great and you can look back and go, oh, well, it used to be different. What that means is that we have that possibility. We have the possibility of, it's like, well, it doesn't have to be this way because it's been different before. And
there's been dissent for millennia.
yes,
That's not new. It's the personal attacks, which is to the point. I mean, we work with a guy whose whole business is helping you ghost yourself on the internet so that people can't come after you. And his clients are police officers, election workers, people, nurses, good God, nurses and doctors who are getting attacked mercilessly, personally. And it's a little shocking, actually, how easy it is to find anybody out there. If you've ever bought anything, you leave digital footprints. And so he's helping. So this is not just, this is, I mean, when you're going after hospital workers and you're going after first responders, fire people in this place. So let's try to land this plane with a little hope and optimism, please, doctor. What could our listener do this week to, you know, let's form an opposition party, an opposition to predatory behavior? And what would our platform be? And what would an action be? What would be we talked about what, so what, and now what? So now what could our listener do this week to take a positive position in opposition of predatory behavior?
I actually, the first thing in my world is to become aware of whether we do it.
Okay.
That's the very first thing.
Look inward.
Am I doing that?
Yeah.
Am I doing that with my wife? Am I doing that with my children? Am I doing that with my neighbor? Am I doing that with, the
And
person at the
if
grocery
not
store?
doing it, condoning it.
Yes, which is then the next step.
Right.
Is am I seeing it done and not doing anything about it?
Right.
And here's what's interesting. If I see something done and I react, if I see someone, let's take a very slight, small predatorial thing. If I see somebody say something to the clerk that's ringing up my groceries, and I don't do anything about that, one, I'm condoning it. But two, if I get predatorial toward that person, then I'm doing the same thing they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the step that I would see, and I'm going to use that metaphor of the clerk ringing out my groceries. Is, let's say the clerk rang up an item twice unknowingly, and the person notices it and makes a very predatory comment like, well, you're stupid, or you're trying to cheat me, or something like that. If you go after the person that's being predatory, that's going to do nothing but escalate. If you go to the clerk and go, are you okay? How was that for you? Where you literally support that person instead of leaving them hanging and having to deal with it.
I'm curious, in that situation, has the predator left the line and now it's you're next in line, and you say, hey, are you okay?
It depends. I have actually done that exact thing.
And did the predator then turn on you?
No. They were so shocked that somebody actually said something. They didn't know what to do, because what they're used to is not challenged.
Right.
Had I said to the predator, what are you doing,
you idiot? Or you say,
yeah,
right, you say, you idiot. So you've just done the same thing.
So I've just done the same thing. But if I say something, for instance, to the clerk, are you okay? Or, wow, it looks like you just made a mistake ringing that up. Is it fixable? I mean, those kinds of things. It takes the bottom out of everything, because here's the bottom line truth is almost everything is fixable, especially if you come in soon.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like being aware of ourselves and beginning the process of shifting it in the present moment.
My friend, what a great way to end this, with a little prescriptive behavior and a way to look at things. And it is the awareness. I didn't see the checking in with the checker to say, are you okay? I love that. And that's how I for sure, I tend to not see those kinds of things. And it's not because I'm not looking. Again, I live 200 yards from the beach. That's a little different here, where I am. However, I'm sure our listener has untold examples. Mr. Freeman, thank you so much. We never know when we start where the plane is going to land, but I love where it landed today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.